Good afternoon, or rather good evening. I've received a bunch of questions during the meeting, during the break, and even via Skype. I'll answer them briefly, since I think this will be interesting for everyone. Mileage, the accuracy of mileage, according to the maps. So, colleagues have been asking, and there was a comment that sometimes we don't trust GPS, but instead look at the driver's mileage according to the odometer. I'd like to clarify this so that everyone has a clear and unambiguous understanding. Colleagues, the road graph, which underlies any map, Google, Yandex, Belgium, Desi, is actually shorter than the distances you are provided with. A driver note, without any mileage manipulation, will on average show 3 to 3.5% more. Why is that? Let me give you a simple example. Take the route of any vehicle you have. Well, let's say, I don't know, Paris to Moscow or anything else. Look at how it actually traveled. Check the mileage according to the GPS. And then try to build exactly the same mileage, exactly the same route on any map using a navigator. And you'll see something surprising. Even if you go through the same intersections, absolutely in the same lanes, the mileage according to the navigator will be about 3% shorter. Here's the question. Why? Why, knowing this all these years? Nevertheless, we don't adjust the GPS data on the navigator. Because traditionally, for decades before our time, drivers' mileage was written off according to the odometer, that is, by the speedometer, as people say, by the rotation of the wheel. That's how mileage is calculated in all the fancy computers of our modern cars. In the old-fashioned, primitive way, like a creaking cart. That is, there is a rotation sensor, a contact, click, click, for each wheel revolution, and knowing the circumference, the mileage is added. That's all there is to it. So, there are international ECE rules according to which the speed on a car's speedometer must be higher than the actual speed. There are various floating coefficients, on average about 3%. Why is this done? It's done so that when a driver is penalized for speeding, they're as far as possible from the speed indicated on the road sign, because in many countries there is no buffer of 10 kilometers per hour or 20 kilometers per hour. You get penalized immediately. If the sign says 100, at 101 you're already penalized. So to avoid disputes and to have fewer court hearings, and in these countries court hearings are very tedious, they simply show the driver a higher speed right away, 105, even though in reality it's 101. And exactly the same coefficient. That same coefficient gets added to its mileage too. And when a driver comes to you with a report and says, for example, that he drove 1,000 kilometers, you can be sure that in reality he drove 970. If you plot the route on any navigator, on any map of the world, you'll see this. So, this guy always has a 3% margin no matter what. And when these people add another 5 to 7% to the mileage, it means they're increasing it even more for themselves. That extra layer of mileage. You just need to keep in mind that even if you calculate it using GPS, adding some percentage for various other factors, the mileage is still slightly overstated. The second question was about the following. The exchange. The exchange. Last time we said A, but we didn't say B. Why? The real issue is the problem turned out not to be technically complex, but legally complex. Because for the exchange to be fully functional, now we're going to implement it at various enterprises, locally, using only those subcontractors with whom contracts have already been approved and signed. All these with multiple approvals going through all the necessary authorities. This will allow us to activate expenses, but only slightly. By about 5%, I think that's how it happened in our experience. If we want to add some fresh blood among the carriers, those we already have, those who are serviced by us, who work for other companies or for themselves, and who also have GPS and pay for it, and these guys are elite too, because most don't even have GPS, then, in order to add them, we need to organize a non-bureaucratic mechanism, something certified, a trusted instant, signing contracts in the event that they win your route as a lot, so that you don't have to correspond with them for a long time, but instead they can instantly accept your terms as a freight carrier, or rather as a cargo carrier. To make this possible, we spent half a year on it, and probably need another 3 months, and then we will be able to provide this in our system when contracts will be signed instantly in accordance with the law in electronic form. The next question concerned personal data. I was asked this during the break. I briefly mentioned it at the beginning, what the legislative changes are about. Colleagues, the legislation regarding cyber Russian personal data has changed significantly. What is its essence? In 2008, The first version of the law stated that personal data is only that document or set of data which allows for unambiguous identification of a person. That is, roughly speaking, a passport number. Everything else is not considered personal data. But excuse me, in 2021, the legislation changed significantly. What was its essence? When we spoke with the regulatory authorities, they explained it to us in very modern terms. Colleagues, for example, let's say you arrive at a hotel somewhere in Turkey and you just go on Google, not even logging into your work account. And after a while, you get the suggestion, "Who are you?" Sergey Ivanovich Petrov. Because based on the totality of your actions collected by Google, for example, over all these years, you are identified by an enormous number of small indirect indicators. In exactly the same way, our legislation has been modernized, and now any information by which indirectly, as you know, like in a kaleidoscope of mosaic tiles, under certain circumstances, a person can be identified in aggregate. All of that is also considered personal data. That's why routes, license plate numbers, and the drivers who take those routes are all recorded. And of course, their last names, all of this is also personal data. So I just want to draw your attention to this. This issue often seems distant, but when an inspection comes, it becomes a major concern. Therefore, pay attention to the fact that your internal systems must be certified to handle personal data, and all your contractors' systems must also be certified to work with personal data. And the last question regarding logic. My colleagues have mentioned it. This is a very important element. There has always been a debate between pure mathematicians, who represent various routing systems, intelligent, non-intelligent, legal, and practical logisticians. The logisticians always said, "What are these routes of yours? You have everything drawn out, scattered all over the place. What kind of nonsense is this when a single vehicle drives around Minsk in zigzags with delivery points in every district? Look at us, we map it out so that all our orders are in one neighborhood. Now that's beautiful. But what you're doing is incomprehensible," the mathematicians would explain. Colleagues, you have to understand, the more, maybe not all routes, but about 20% of them are crisscrossed and spread out, let's say, like dough rolled thinly across a baking sheet, the easier it is for artificial intelligence to organize vehicles to move from one district to another, picking up the outermost orders. There's no need to send a vehicle from a district where economically it would make less sense. So where is the middle ground? And in order to, so to speak, have both the wolves fed and the sheep safe, we simply decided not to argue because both sides are right. Some say, the mathematicians, that this way you have the lowest costs. What are you making up with this clustering idea? But the practitioners say, guys, you probably aren't taking into account the bottlenecks in the stores, which can be significant. You scheduled a half-hour unloading there, but he could end up stuck for 2 hours. He arrives at the store, there's a line. Why should I stand there? He needs to dash off to another block, somewhere in the same area, and unload there in the meantime. Then we check back here again. Has the line cleared up or not? Both sides are right. That's why we simply gave you the ability to adjust things smoothly. This is the engine for density, allowing you to shift it to the most extreme ends, or set it somewhere in the middle, so you can choose in each specific situation what matters most to you as logisticians, saving money or convenience in a single unit. And the last thing I want to say is more of a philosophical question, probably, which we also raised on this topic as well. Tell me, please, do you have server-based solutions and can you do everything? This, what I talked about at the beginning, can it be built only on our servers? This is about a large company. I would put it this way. Of course, we are keeping up with the trend. And if some major client says that for certain fundamental reasons of their own, they believe their own solution is better, we can build all of this on your servers. If you have the appropriate amount of money, yes, this is a project on the scale of 1C, but what does that give you? This will only give you one thing. Autonomy in the event of some kind of unclear global collapse, when everything around you goes down, but yours keeps running automatically. But it's like, installing a generator in some bunker, which really does provide autonomy. But even then, in the modern world, you'll still need to supply it with fuel to keep it running. So complete autonomy is not advantageous. Even if you have a generator, it's more beneficial for you to connect to our nuclear power plant, which is a cloud solution for you. Why is this beneficial? Because even when you have our artificial intelligence algorithm installed, if it doesn't have access to the transport flow database, it can't accurately predict tomorrow's workload or the density of operations or the speed and timing mode for each of your drivers on every road. As a result, it will be forced to not reach the edge of optimality so as not to have conflicts with the drivers. And that's why you'll end up spending about 10% more, even if you have your own algorithm, than if it were connected even by a tiny wire to our big data. So you'll be interested yourself. Yes, we have a higher core advantage. You have full autonomy, But until that's achieved, thank goodness, you have the option to connect to our big data, which still improves your performance. And if you disconnect, everything will work autonomously, but just a little bit worse than ours. And to put it even more broadly, I'd like to offer you this comparison. We just have to accept as a fact that we can't buy the most effective, most desirable things in the world. Let's say, for example, you want to fly to Moscow tomorrow. You don't actually think about buying your own plane, do you? You buy a ticket from Aeroflot or Belavia. You get on board and entrust what is most valuable to you, your life, to this cloud-based system. You use the internet, mobile communication, as it is provided. No one ever feels the urge to build their own mobile network in Belarus just to be independent from everyone else. Let's say we put in $500 million, pay 10% of its maintenance every year, but at least it would be our own. But instead, we use mobile communication for just a few kopecks. Maybe we want to download Wikipedia. We can do that. But it would immediately become obsolete because it wouldn't be updated by hundreds of millions of people every day. You see, the most valuable thing in the world is ChatGPT. If we cut it off from being updated by billions of people every day, it will lose its value. It's more beneficial for it to stay connected and pay a small fee to always remain at the cutting edge of technology. And the same goes for airplanes. Since I've already started on this, my favorite topic, if you buy an Airbus, the most valuable, the most important component in the plane isn't the electronics, it's the engine. So the best engine in the world, Rolls-Royce, you cannot buy it. Maybe not many people know this, but if you buy an Airbus, the engine is not your property. It belongs to Rolls-Royce. They install the engine on your plane, remove it for maintenance, take it to their facility, repair it themselves, return it back, and you only pay for the hours flown. That's why the 21st century it changes our usual understanding of ownership. And not everything is worth buying because it's simply inefficient. But if you give us such a direct task, we will solve it. It's just that we haven't had such situations yet. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
Good afternoon. My name is Dmitry from Domino's Pizza. I have a request. Well, this is a question for the participants, actually, and a request. I manage a large fleet of vehicles, so I'm in charge of all of them. And I wanted to ask you to create a product. I've spoken with your managers about this, specifically regarding traffic accidents, tracking the process of restoring all vehicles financially. There are a lot of, about 10 possible scenarios for how things can develop, if not more, right? And with each case, deductions, compensation, restoration, you have to keep track of everything. Managing these processes for 15 vehicles with 10 possible scenarios in your head or in Excel is very difficult. I'm sure you could do it better here.
Could you clarify what you mean by tracking traffic accidents?
The process of restoring the vehicle with all the parties at fault, the payments, and everything else. You understand? And
in fact, this can already be implemented under our current conditions. Product fields, because for us, if there is integration with your 1C system, it's possible there. For each vehicle, a list of its expenses is maintained. And then everything that comes from your accounting system will be automatically included. The only problem is that what we usually do within our product is aimed at not having to enter anything manually. So what is 1C? It's a great accounting system, but you have to upload everything by hand. Every single accounting document so that it's stored there forever. And in your case, all the write-offs, all the repairs, all these restoration acts, someone has to upload all of that. That's why we can import it from there for you, show it to you, basically wherever it's needed, where we calculate the cost of your trips, so that not only regular depreciation is applied there, but also these force majeure events that you mentioned. But this can already be done simply through deep integration. Well, if we're talking about Domino's Pizza and these kinds of express delivery services, of course, it's a whole different story. You know better than I do all those legends about the police-style U-turns your daring couriers have made, which ended up on YouTube. So here, it's probably very important to implement the system we talked about at the beginning. All that driving analytics that shows all these things, not after an accident has already happened. That's the beauty of modern technology. They can show you with a high degree of probability that this person is already heading straight toward a checkpoint. It hasn't happened yet. You can still warn them, but they're already heading there. They're literally following the route. We,
together with Dmitry, started this process, and it was partially developed based on our vehicles. That's why I'm aware of all of this. It's a very good system. But for a number of reasons, we can't implement it for ourselves yet.
Yes, because for now we can only react after the fact. So an accident happens and we start dealing with it. We start to take it into account somehow, but it's better if it doesn't happen at all. But how do you make that happen? Everyone knows the story, probably from about 15 years ago in America. In one of those supermarkets, a girl who was, I think, 13 years old was recommended products for pregnant women. Her mother sued, asking what kind of outrage this was. She was only 12 or 13 years old. And then it turned out that she really was pregnant. So based on her choice of products, the system suggested that she was most likely pregnant because those are the kinds of products pregnant women buy. That's why artificial intelligence works wonders when analyzing big data. And you can actually use this to anticipate situations. Because in your situation, when you need a huge flow of people to replenish your, so to speak, courier staff, you are selecting from a very large pool, and it's very difficult to sort through who is allowed behind the wheel and who is not. Because outwardly, both people have 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, 2 ears. Wonderful people. And everyone even has a driver's license. But when it comes to what's inside, some people shouldn't be allowed near a car at all, while for others you could roll out the red carpet. And this is exactly where we can help you the most. That's all, colleagues. Thank you very much for the meeting. I hope everyone enjoyed it. We'll meet again in the evening in 6 months. Thank you. All the best.